Boko Haram is a violent Islamist insurgent group. It's based predominantly in northeastern Nigeria, and its aim is to establish an Islamist State and full Sharia law. Boko Haram is opposed to all secular activities and anything associated with Western culture. The group began in 2002, but it began its violent activities in 2009, and since then it's been responsible for hundreds of killings. It has different types of methods. One is attacks on villages, looting, burning houses, killing villagers. The other has been bombs in public places, in cities, and also many attacks on schools because it's opposed to Western education. So students have been killed, and most recently, in April, over 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped. Boko Haram fighters are based predominantly along the border with Cameroon and also along the border with Niger. There's really a risk that the insurgency could move into these countries. The fighters and their leaders are able to move backwards and forwards very freely across these porous borders. And both these countries are at risk, but particularly Niger, because it has its own problems with grievances around inequalities and poverties, which could make it very vulnerable to a growing Islamist insurgency. Beyond the immediate neighbours, Boko Haram has links with other insurgent groups in Africa. Particularly in Mali, there's evidence that Boko Haram fighters were trained by the group Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, and that there is links in terms of funding and logistics between the two groups. While Boko Haram's stated aim is to establish an Islamist state, in fact there are many complex factors, dynamics that fuel the conflict. Many young, poor, marginalised northern Nigerian men are prompted to join Boko Haram because of deep grievances they have around political exclusion and social and economic exclusion. Nigeria is a deeply unequal society. The country is very wealthy due to its oil resources, but most of this wealth goes to a small elite, and 70% of the population live in dire poverty. This is particularly true in northern Nigeria, which receives very little of the national resources and is profoundly underdeveloped with no basic services or very limited basic services and very little access to development resources and opportunities for its population. Beyond these socio-economic grievances, there are also real problems with corruption, particularly in politics, which makes the population obviously feel disenfranchised and increases grievances. Likewise, there have been problems with the rule of law and with police and military brutality, particularly in response to the insurgency. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have accused the Nigerian police and military of widespread disappearances, extrajudicial executions and torture, which obviously further the anger of the local population and encourage them to join insurgent activities. So far, the response of the Nigerian state has been primarily military, trying to eradicate Boko Haram by force. Last year, the state declared a state of emergency in the northern areas to deal with the problem of Boko Haram, but it hasn't been working. In fact, what we've seen is since the state of emergency declared, many more civilians have died in Boko Haram-related violence. The problem with this military-only strategy is twofold. One is that Boko Haram is a very fragmented grouping. Doesn't have a hierarchical structure, has a number of different leaderships, so it's very difficult for it to be taken out militarily. Also, the Nigerian military lacks the capacity to deal effectively with Boko Haram, and in fact a flawed counter-insurgency strategy is exacerbating the problem. So what is needed is obviously there needs to be a military response, a response with force, but alongside that there needs to be a response which addresses the grievance of the population in northern Nigeria, that provides development, that redistributes some of the resources that come from energy wealth, and that gives some kind of credible political representation to this population, because only that is obviously going to address the long-term underlying factors. The Nigerian government has been dragging its feet in terms of the response, but the kidnap of the schoolgirls last month has really placed international pressure on the government, so hopefully that will mean that they're more likely to take some more comprehensive action rather than this just police-military response. In terms of international actors, there's really a limit to how likely international actors are to get deeply involved in this situation because it's problematic and because of the poor human rights record of the Nigerian military and police. What we've seen is in response to this particular kidnapping of the schoolgirls, a number of countries, including the UK, the US, have offered some practical assistance in finding the girls, but it's very unlikely that these countries will come in and offer more comprehensive assistance to the Nigerian military in addressing Boko Haram. In fact, what these countries need to do is to provide pressure on the Nigerian government to address these more deep-seated problems about corruption within politics, corruption within public life, and the need for development in the poorest northern Nigerian areas, because this is what's going to make a difference in the long term to this conflict.